All right, everyone. Welcome to this Clubhouse event. Your energy, your health, be responsible with empowering solutions. And Lakesh and Veritas, with honor, respect, and gratitude. I would like to start by raising the vibration in the space that we're in now by calling for the highest possible vibration and calling for the truth to come forward into our discussion so that the truth can be seen, heard, and spoken, and that we all be in the frequency of truth and have nothing but the truth. Shall I call, excuse me, shall we call for the divine feminine to bring balance back into our world, showing us the way through honor, respect, and gratitude, and calling for the highest possible vibration. I now ask for everyone to take a sip of water as water holds memory, and ask for the water to hydrate our brain and body. Now let's take a deep breath in. 3, 2, 1, and let it all out. And take another deep breath in, bringing in peace, joy, gratitude, life, and exhaling out, releasing all stress and worry, all that does not serve you. And Lakesh and Veritas, everyone, I call forth the oneness and truth of the information shared by each and every one of us on this call, calling in that frequency of truth so that we all can experience all that is truth, as it is our purpose to bring forward the truth, so that we all can benefit from this information shared with honor, respect, and gratitude to you all. The greeting and Lakesh signifies unity, where everything is related to one another, where everything and everyone is connected. It is the idea of community, where we can share with one another ideas, goals, aspirations, so that we all, as one, can benefit and thrive. And Lakesh is that declaration in which we are clearing our spaces, the space we're in now, so that we may be able to bring forth a truthful, elevated, and enlightened discussion this evening, clearing away those thoughts that we tend to pick up and carry with us from our everyday life experiences. The words En Lakesh and Veritas is a powerful affirmation that assists in bringing in clarity and a greater understanding of truth to all who are present and to all who are listening. Our words have power, so let us remember and decide to use our words carefully, using words of upliftment, encouragement, and enlightenment. By doing so, as a collective, will help us to transform our spaces and places into higher frequencies and better experiences for each and every one of us here, as well as for those others who we touch. So, En Lakesh and Veritas, everyone, with honor, respect, and gratitude. Before we begin, I'd like for everyone to hold their water in their hands again. And I would like to now ask for everyone with intention in mind to send the frequency of En Lakesh to their water, into your water. And then take a sip of your water. We are 70% water, and water holds information and memory, thereby assisting in incorporating this elevated frequency of En Lakesh into our cells and into the subatomic space within our bodies. By doing this technique, it will allow for the ease and flow of the information we'll be sharing with one another here this evening. I also want to remind everyone that you can access the recording to this Clubhouse event and recordings from our prior Clubhouse events on Vimeo and YouTube by searching En Lakesh Studios. And please remember to subscribe if you have not already done so. You could also find more information and content on enlakeshstudio2.com so that you can keep up to date with the information and content that is continually being added. All right, everyone. Remember, there's a lot of confusion out there in this world, and there are many questions that people are having concerning their personal well-being. So last week, we talked about ways we can get answers utilizing some tools to obtain viable answers to our questions. So Diane was with us on Clubhouse last week, and she shared with us information on how we can use the technique of kinesiology. This is a tool that has been in existence for over 2,000 years, which some today refer to as muscle testing. And that was very helpful last week. So I encourage you to listen to that to gain more information on kinesiology. So Diane also brought forward another tool to answer questions, and that's by utilizing the Call for Truth divination cards, the companion to the Call for Truth publication, that we discussing this technique and its utilization, a publication that was created by Laota Rasul of the Sun. Again, I encourage you to listen to the call from last week on Vimeo or on YouTube or YouTube. So today we are here to discuss another method in which we can get answers, and this is through the act of being a communicator. This method is of receiving answers, requires much discipline, and it's a method in which we all have the ability to do so once we are properly prepared and we have the proper practices behind us. So I've invited Tarvars of the Sun here to share with us the definition of what a communicator is and the process on its methodology. And Tarvars, thank you again for joining us. Are you there? Can you hear us? Available?
Yes, I am. And Lakesh Veritas, honor, respect, and gratitude to you and everyone on the line.
And Lakesh Veritas, with honor, respect, and gratitude. Can you provide us some insight information on the definition of a communicator and its process and how we can go about doing so ourselves?
Okay, so my definition is going to be a little lengthy
Yes,
with
absolutely.
first, second, third, fourth line. So, uh, a communicator. When you consider the idea of communicator, I'm sure one of the first thing that probably comes to your mind is communication. You
Mm-hmm.
know, sharing information, receiving information is something that we're doing right now. We are communicating with each other.
Right.
There's a listener on the receiving end, and there's someone relaying the information. Get that divine masculine and divine feminine principle just literally within the interaction, right?
Right.
So
Mm-hmm.
this idea of communication, it is available within all forms of interaction. It's like one of the most fundamental aspects of our reality to receive, to transmit uh, information. And essentially with the sun, we are communicating with all forms of life.
Mm-hmm.
And the communication, it is different than what we have been taught, like being psychic and speaking to other forms of consciousnesses, because much of it has been distorted.
Mm-hmm.
Much of it is also what we've seen on TV and Hollywood's, which has an aspect of the truth, but is really not the way how things work, which
Right.
many of us on the line who are also communicators have come to understand, and having to work through those blocks that were intentionally designed to mislead us from the truth of who we are.
Right.
So consider that within our reality, we have the capacity to speak to the trees. We have the capacity to speak to the fly, the bee, the wasp, the birds. We have the capacity to speak with the ancestors, with the angels, the archangels, many different forms of life, both animate and inanimate, physical and non physical. And from my understanding, this is done through the transmission of frequency,
Mm-hmm.
and last time I checked, trees don't have mouths, nor do they have eyes, or do they? And just not in the way in which we perceive them.
Right. Right.
So it's not necessarily anthropomorphic, but it is in the sense of, and this is again where like, the cartoons and the movies kind of misled us, where you got the talking trees, right? The trees with the eyes and the mouth. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know why, but the magic school bus is popping up in my mind, and there's this bus with eyes and a mouth, and
Yep.
it's like that, but it's not. And what we are really doing when we communicate is we are interfacing with the information in the field of another. There's translation of it, assimilation, reverberation of the frequency and the information, and this is happening at such deep levels, whether we are aware of it or not. And I understand that this is something that each and every one of us on the line, and for those who are not on the line, we were born with this. We were equipped with this. We
Mm-hmm.
were also duped and tricked to not appropriately understand how to function. Lao Tzu has made this joke, which, it's also in all seriousness too. We didn't come to this planet with an instruction manual on how to operate this technology, the human body.
Right, right,
Like how to be a human 101 was not provided to us upon entry. If you got that, please pass it over. Email it to me in PDF form. Put it in my
right,
Kindle.
right.
However, what we are doing within of a sun is establishing these understandings of how to be a human, how to be the divine masculine, how to be the divine feminine, how to interface with all forms of life and
Mm-hmm.
communicate and receive information. And in this process, it is rather heretical because much of what we teach goes against some of the traditional norms and understandings of what it means to be psychic, what it means to translate, receive, and communicate information. So I'm going to stop there. Like I said, it was going to be a little lengthy definition. Any thoughts on that, Delilah? Do you feel like I kind of covered some of the foundational basis?
Yes, you did, because there's a lot of misconceptions and myths regarding this particular practice. So, and that was an excellent explanation for people to get that clear understanding of what a communicator is. I wanted to know if you can also touch, last week you did touch on that, but people confuse being a communicator and communicating with the consciousness with someone who channels. And in actuality, being a communicator, the way you described it, is a science behind it. But can you explain the difference between the two?
Yes, gladly. So I'm going to give it to you how I think it was one of the archangels shared with me in a communication.
Hmm.
And when this was shared, it was just so clear and apparent, especially from live experiences that I've had from different channelers and seeing what took place during that process.
Uh-huh.
So consider when a person channels, they are permitting and allowing a being to occupy their vessel.
Hmm.
We can also translate that into the term known as possession.
Hmm.
And what literally happens is possession in its truest form, where the individual has little to no control over themselves. And the being, whether this is an old family member who is still earthbound or some other entity that says it's here to help,
Right, right,
it is taking over the vessel. And in doing so, like if you consider this idea of taking over, that could equate and does equate into the idea of enslavement.
right.
You're
No
not in
control,
control.
no control, loss and control.
Exactly. Is that where we want to be?
Right,
Is there not a better way for us to communicate or to interface with non-physical and physical forms of consciousness? So
right,
I understand that this is a very archaic way of doing things. It has been done in many different cultures throughout history. But I'm here to tell you there is a much better way that is less invasive of
hmm,
allowing a foreign entity into your vessel, all up
right,
in you to occupy space. So this is what I understand channeling to be. And of course, there's various levels of intensity of what I'm sharing in extremes, but at the same time, I'm in my vessel. I don't need nobody else in here. Let's have a check. I signed the agreement to come into this body. And
right.
so consider that with channeling, there is a form of like willing or willful enslavement, allowing oneself to, or one's authority to be relinquished to another. And we already have enough problems with that as it is, as a human species. So now, on the flip side, the alternative is communicating,
Mm-hmm.
where with communicating, it's a whole different vibe. I think even if you tune into the energy of this word and the morphic field around it, communicating, communicator, has a lighter feel to it. Would you agree? Without me even like going into description?
Yes, it definitely is, because you're still, you're still conscious of yourself, of you, who you are, as opposed to, so being channeling, you're unaware of what's going on within you, and like you said, they're taking over your vessel. Or
Yes. So so we have this dichotomy of enslavement and then the opposite of that, freedom. And what was shared in the communication is consider communicating being rooted within the laws and principles of freedom, respect, and freedom of the individual who is, like you and me, the human that is speaking with the non physical being or physical being through
mm-hmm,
time and space, and the mutual respect to allow the information to flow through uninterrupted
mm-hmm,
by our own personal input. It's freedom expressed on both ends.
right,
And of course, you're not necessarily allowing something outside of you to occupy your vessel. Now, one thing about this, though, is that when you are in the field of another energy or consciousness, uh, with that overlap, there is an influence or an exchange. And one of the examples I gave last week on Clubhouse was the example of anyone on the phone who has been in the presence physically or non physically, like just through time and space, maybe in a consultation with Lauta,
mm-hmm.
and the feeling of the uprightness within your being when you're in her field. And the joke about how, like, when you know you're about to be in her field and you're already upright 30 minutes before the consult,
Yeah, you're right.
maybe even all that day. I know in some of my experiences, like, oh, I'm about to speak to Lauta, and then you're just excited and like that
I know
because
I'm
of
gonna
what you're
get some
moving to.
insight and some answers.
Exactly. And so that's within the field too, right? So all of this and those answers, you're getting the truth. You kind of
Yeah,
know what you're in for, but even most importantly, like when you make that interaction, it's palpable of
right.
who and what you're engaging with. Now, although within your being you can feel the erectness, you can feel what I understand essentially is um, it's frequency influence. Her frequency is the dominant frequency, and
Mm-hmm,
it's bringing you up through your willingness, of course, and
mm-hmm,
it raises us up, and it's no different than engaging with a tree. It's no different than engaging with the archangel realm. So there's a palpable sensation that can be felt and understood that I am interfacing with something.
right.
Although it's not in me, I'm engaged with it. It's no different than having a regular conversation from with family members. You can feel the energy being transferred from the overlapping of the fields.
Mm-hmm,
So this is what I understand to be taking place when we are communicating. And it's even so much more to it, but this is the foundational understanding. We are pulling forth the information that's in the field, and it's all through frequency. And again, it doesn't look how we thought it would look, where, like, you're putting your ring finger and your index finger and pointing them on both sides of your temporal lobes, closing your eyes, like, yeah, telepathic communication, and sending thought waves. It's not really like that. It doesn't require all the fantasticalness. And the funny thing is that we're already doing it. We just don't know that we're doing it.
right,
And much of
right.
what I have learned over time uh, was establishing this idea of, once you know you can do a thing, that's when the open sesame happens. That's when you start going through the gateway, so to say, where, like, I didn't know that, for example, okay, well, I'd like to kind of speak about the Akasha, but I don't know. Did you want me to speak about the Akasha this evening? Because I kind of thought we
Yeah, that
were,
was my
but I don't want to get ahead of myself.
question. No, no, that was my next question. With regards to the Akashic record reading, and how does it relate to as a communication, or as a as a communicator?
Yes. Okay. Because some of the examples that are coming from within me are directly connected to the Akashic records, and
Yes.
some of my earlier experiences, which I think that many people on the line would be able to relate to, based upon some of the preconceived ideas that we have as it relates to engaging with this quote unquote modality.
Yeah. Can you explain for people who are new to the Akashic records what that is?
Yes.
Before we go into the connection between that and Akashic record reading and communicators.
So consider that all experiences are held within an etheric record. I consider all the experiences that we've had in this lifetime, all the experiences that we've had in past lifetimes, experiences that have taken place planetarily, associated with collective consciousness, things that have happened universally, things that have happened dimensionally, through time and space, are all recorded. And not only is it recorded, but it's accessible. And the thing is that we don't really recognize that this is something that the layman or the everyday person can actually tap into. So the idea of the akasha being able to review the experiences that transpired in the past to understand where we are now, to understand our future. And one of the cool things about the akasha is that you see future trajectories. However, nothing's really set in stone because it is going based. It's the akasha is showing us potentials for a future that's based on our past and our present. One of the
Right.
things that I have learned with working with the sun is the moment you start thinking different, your future changes.
Yeah, it's free
You know?
will, right? It's all about
Yeah.
free will.
And there are, of course, things like destiny and things that we've signed up for in terms of contracts. But even within that, there's that free will and what will we do? Like the
Mhm.
people we will marry or have children with, or the jobs we will work, and everything that happens in between that. Within that experience, there's some level of the free will, but there's also agreements. It's
Mhm.
consider that this etheric compendium of all knowledge and history is something that humans have had access to since the beginning.
Mhm.
So some of the definitions for akasha or akash, it comes from Sanskrit, Hindu,
Mhm.
and when you translate it, it literally means like space, sky, atmosphere. So with such a simple translation, considering that the akasha is in the atmosphere, it's all around us. We
Mhm.
are in. Another way we could look at this is it's the field. We exist within the field, and the field has information. We're within fields, within fields, within fields, and we are unconsciously influenced by these fields,
Mhm.
and we get information.
Right. That's
And
the
go
field.
ahead.
Those are
Hmm?
our energetic fields, our energy fields.
Yes, ma'am.
Mhm.
So, but within these fields, the memory or the information that's recorded or imprinted is there. Now, there are people who throughout time have taught about the Akasha as being some sort of library. Like I'm walking through the halls and I can turn to my left to this bookshelf and then I go to the third row and pull the fifth book to the right and then I open up and start looking through your past life. That ain't really how it's working for me. I'm just gonna just spell
Yeah.
that that fantasy. I'm not saying people don't do that, but that's not my experience. As a matter of fact, I like to share what it was like when I first learned how to read the Akasha, and then kind of move into the new understandings that I have tapped into, and I want to give honor, respect, and gratitude to Lao Tzu because uh, it's kind of funny working with a master teacher where there's so much patience and uh,
Absolutely. I
and not
agree. Thank you. With honor, respect, and gratitude
right
as we
for
go through
real.
our lessons.
I don't know if anyone on the line has had experiences where you step into a level of awakening and awareness, and then you realize like the behavior or the ignorance that you existed in that you're now on the other side of, and then you look to your master teacher, you're like, oh my gosh, how did you deal with me? And you were just so patient. Thank you. It's just so much gratitude, and that has happened several times over with me.
Yeah.
So
Oh yeah. Or even thinking like, what are you talking? What is she talking about? And then you get over it. I'm like, oh, that's what she was talking about. Like
yeah,
hit you in the face. Like, oh man, was I like, that? Oh my goodness.
it's so funny. It's making me think about like when we're children and our parents are trying to tell us about things, and they're like, you know what, you'll understand when you get older. And I'm like,
Let you
I'm
go,
older,
bump
I get
your
it.
head. Let you go bump your head and figure it, and then you'll figure it out. I'm like, oh man, if I had listened before and understood, it wouldn't have hurt so much. In my
Yeah,
head.
yeah. Talk about a high level of respect for the free will of the soul.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this idea of, so again, honor, respect, and gratitude to Lao Tzu. She's on the line, and
Yes.
because
Absolutely.
in recent times my understanding has completely shifted, and I have went through this unfoldment and for actually several years when she first shared with me that the way how I was taught to enter into the records is not necessary.
Hmm.
And although I was operating differently, there were still constructs in my way that was interfering from going deeper and attaining higher levels of information. So I'd like to kind of share the experiences, and in sharing the story and the experiences, I understand that many of the principles and understandings as it relates to the Akasha and what's required of an individual to accurately pull forth and read information from the Akasha, but what's
Yeah.
necessary in terms of like frequency,
Yeah.
because this
Yeah.
this
That's
isn't a
why
thing.
I
Oh,
wanted
go
you
ahead.
to go into that. The frequency in order to get clear information with regards to when you're tapping into the records, the Akashic records.
Oh yeah, yeah, and that let's even start there. This isn't something where we can eat pizza and play video games, eat bonbons, chicken wings all day,
Oh my
you know,
God. Yeah.
parasites in our gut, bloated, and talking about, hold on, let me put my wing down. I'm gonna enter the Akasha. This is not that.
Right.
It requires it the universal laws, or adherence to the universal laws, require us to maintain our frequency.
Hmm.
And in order to tap into, I understand that the Akasha is the law. It's like connected with the greater idea of universal law, and I won't get into that per se, but the idea is this requires you to be of a high vibration. It
Hmm.
requires you to be congruent. It requires one to ensure that they are leaned into the truth of their knowingness and not living a life of doubt, because that's going to play out. I mean, so I'll start it off here. So I learned how to read the records about 8 years ago,
Hmm.
and it was, I think, 2014, and I was taught to read through what is called the pathway prayer. And in that stage of development, I had this extreme fixation on opening my third eye. How many
Yeah.
of us were like, "Ooh, I got to open my third eye so I can spiritually see, because that is what the internet and YouTube told me I need to do to be spiritual." And, I fell for that trick,
Yeah.
because it totally is, and you really, truth be told, you need more than your third eye to see. It's not centralized.
Right.
It's non-localized. If you feel where I'm coming from with this,
Right.
so I get into class, I'm given a prayer and thinking, man, when I read this prayer, holographic projection's gonna open out. from my third eye pineal gland, and I'm gonna see, and I'm gonna be walking through the halls of Amenti,
I
walking through
know.
the halls of the libraries of the Akasha.
You're
And
talking about me. Go ahead.
I feel like you already know what happens next. I read that pathway prayer. I swear I heard crickets. Chirp, chirp. What is going on? Silence. It's just me and my thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the rude awakening. This is not happening how I thought it was going to happen.
Right.
YouTube, you were wrong. And whatever books that I read that, they don't give you, and that's the thing, when we call ourselves trying to gain information and knowledge from just random websites and YouTube video gurus, it's fragmented understandings. People don't have the full, depth of the knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
So at best, we're going to get a fragment of that understanding. And I could see that's what I carried into it.
Mm-hmm.
Even though, the teacher I was working with at the time was a full blown practitioner. So slowly through my development of the Akasha, I began to realize that it's not how I think it's going to happen. Like, and then I was confronted with this idea of spiritual sight and seeing, where again we think that the ultimate of the ultimate for spiritual development is seeing. And again, shout out to, or in honor, respect, and gratitude to the master teacher Laota. She speaks about how this idea of like not everybody who sees is accurately seeing.
Right.
And even people who can see are not typically of a high vibration, so we can wash that away, or
Right.
just miss that idea. So I was challenged and confronted with, okay, so it's not happening how I thought it was in this fantastical way. How do I do this? And I don't recall the exact nuance of what led me to it, but I'm just going to lean into the idea of guidance shared with me to lean into my strong suit, which I understand that this is many of the people on the line, pretty much every human on the planet. Our strong suit is through the feeling, what we feel, and the information that's riding the wave of the feeling that's assimilated and translated through our mind. And then information arises through the feeling.
Yeah. Yes.
And you feel where I'm coming from? No pun intended.
Oh no. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Because when I do bioenergetics, it's shared that the heart is the feeling component
Mm,
and is the master communicator to all your cells of your body. It governs everything through all the tissues throughout your body. It's signaling. So yes, I totally agree with that.
yes.
The
I'm
feeling.
going to drop a little gem that came through from one of our allies, and the idea of telepathy. It's not just the third eye. The heart's included, and other aspects of the human body
Yeah. I
are interfacing, and part of that is the feeling. The magnetization of what's coming through the field and the assimilation of that. So we're a whole being here. We're not just our third eye. It's what I had to
right.
realize.
I mean, just the fact of love. Feel love when some two people love each other. I mean, that type of relational love. You can feel the love of another person. That's a feeling.
Yes, and you can feel when that person does not love you,
Yeah.
or maybe they're aggressing
And
you,
so
or there's
then
resentment.
you want to run away, or not run away, but yeah, avoid them. Yeah, that's
Yeah. Yes, the I think the main point here is that through feeling arises information, right? And
hmm
especially with the examples that you gave, you can feel and you are informed, and that information translates into whatever is in your lexicon of your conscious mind, in terms of words. So there is a science to this. It
yeah,
truly is. It's a high science. And so through my process, I started leaning into my feelings. I also realized that there was a block because I was told growing up, oh, you're a punk for being sensitive.
yeah,
I know
yeah,
many children who were hypersensitive to energies. Some people refer to it as empath. But whatever term we're using, you know, this is pretty much the case with all souls, and then it shuts down because we're raised in a world where we're not taught how to assimilate and understand our emotions, assimilate and understand the energies in a space. Like, oh, I don't want to sit in grandpa's lap, but I'm being forced to. And what is this thing that I feel, this resistance, right, to this family member? We're not
Mm-hmm.
taught how to understand this. So this aspect of ourselves gets shut down, especially for those who have a very heightened sense of it. And I was one of those. And so this was a part of my journey where I had to go into the feeling. But I tell you what, though, oh my gosh, Lord have mercy. Through going into the feeling, I began to quote unquote see. I
Mm-hmm.
began to quote unquote spiritually hear. Like, but it was different than what I thought it would be,
Right.
and we're going to be exploring exercises in the Akashic record classes coming up, leaning into the feeling, because that's the one thing that everyone has in common. There are some people who already are working with quote unquote spiritual sight. Um, there's clear audience, clear sentience, the different clairs,
Mm-hmm.
but we all can feel. So through the feeling, we will be exploring how to interpret information in the field and how that process unfolds through thought, revealing information from what we're connecting with. So this is actually a direct correlation with the idea of communicating, in the
Mm-hmm.
sense of we're just translating the information and what we feel. Does this make sense this far? Just kind of want
Yeah.
to touch the pulse of yourself, or I don't know
Oh
if the
yeah.
audience has any questions, but I just want to make sure like this makes sense.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it definitely does because I know we're going to touch later on how people can find out information about this Akashic record reading class, but you can tell, kind of give people an idea on what to expect because you know just basically what you're doing is you're clarifying a lot of the misconceptions and myths that are behind even the Akashic reading about communicating and doing this class if someone is interested in delving deeper into this and getting a better understanding and actually learning how to do it yourself. Then
Yes.
you know this is something to think about signing up.
Yes, ma'am. So
Mhm.
this class will be a form, from one perspective, a form of liberation,
Mhm.
liberation for the soul. Because again, we were tricked. We were
Right.
taught that we were not properly taught how to understand what we feel. Although
Mm.
it has been a gateway that's been closed off by many in fear of what lies beyond it. The fear of the trauma associated with our adolescence experiences and the interpretation, the assimilation of those emotions, and our ability and capacity to understand other people's intentions. So this idea of the Akasha, it will be an understanding that everything is the Akasha. The Akasha is all around us. We are literally swimming in it. It is, as it's translated, Akasha, atmosphere. But you got to reach high to tap into this atmosphere. You got to be clear. You
Right.
gotta be informed properly and understand that you can even do this. So, a lot of this will be dispelling the fairy tale, and the
Right.
truth of the reality that has continued to escape us.
Can
And
you can
yes,
you uh, tell us? Can you differentiate? I liken it a little bit to an intuition, but at a more heightened um, level of tapping into by tapping into the records. But can you kind of explain the difference from intuition? Because everyone has intuition, and I think that that's something that's relatable to most people as opposed to the Akashic records. This may be new to some people, which is you can further explain.
yes. So consider that intuition and the idea of the Akasha are separate yet connected. So when we have intuitive experiences, it may look like the guttural feeling that we have of, ooh, I should go left instead of right.
Mm-hmm.
or I don't know if it's a good idea to eat this. I don't know if I should be in business with this person or date that person,
Right.
or maybe I should. It's the information that arises, or the inner knowing that arises. Um, Sometimes we're not able to really quantify where that comes from. Like, where is that coming from?
Mm-hmm.
So my understanding is that the idea of intuition is information. We are being informed by the atmosphere, the sea of frequencies, the information in the field, or the Akasha. I understand that there are many of our world's greatest thinkers and inventors were tapped into the Akasha. Me and Lao Tzu got this joke about Einstein. Like, yeah, Einstein was all up in the Akasha. You can
Yeah.
tell from many of his quotes. He
Yeah.
was all up
Yeah.
in it.
He
And
was.
she goes, yeah, that's why his hair was the way it was, and it was so gray. Yeah. So, you know, Nikolai Tesla, all up in the Akasha,
Mm-hmm.
and it's so clear and evident because, like, where's he getting this information from? Where's it coming
Right.
from? It's beyond himself, but at the same time, it is self. He's connected with the field as we all are. We're not separate from this idea, but
Right.
the way in which we intuit information is kind of like that pinging and that resonance with the truth of the frequencies that we're interfacing with and the information in the field that we're picking up on, which is predominantly unconscious. But again, it spawns as this inner knowing. This, I can't tell you exactly why, but I just know. I
Yep.
just know. I got this feeling, right? And this is something that, again, like, everyone has, for the most part, experienced at some level or degree.
Right.
Does that help give clarity?
Yeah. Yes, it does. It does because you went right back into that feeling.
Yeah, I'm telling you, that's where it's at. I have been running away from the thing. I've been running away from my power. And
Mm-hmm.
think about, like, we are afraid to feel emotions. We have escapism. People do drugs and other forms of addiction, whether you're eating chocolate cake or whatever it may be, to escape from understanding our feelings.
Yep.
But this is us. We must learn how to understand. We must learn how to calculate, how to assimilate, how to translate. Primarily because the darkness has been using this um, this ignorance that we've displayed regarding who we are against ourselves.
Right. Right.
So it's this, from one perspective, this helps us get in the game. Matter of fact, not even in the game. We're not even playing by their game and their rules. We're deciding to, let's get back to the original divine blueprint here. Let's tap into the Akasha. Let's be able to tap into the field to see the truth of, how did I get to where I'm at, and where is this leading me? What can I do to change this? And again, it's very different than um, how I was taught. I'd like to share an idea of, like, sometimes it's presented as like this fantastical thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'll lay down an example. So within the Akasha, although you are working with the field, right? Within the field of the Akasha, we here out of the sun, I want to make something very, very clear. All the work that we do out of the sun is within the Akasha.
Mm-hmm.
This is from advanced soul clearings, DNA activation, soul translation in its many forms and iterations. Um, Everything, everything we're doing, the technologies, the insignias, that's Akasha.
Right. Right.
Like, so, what
Yeah.
a lot. Go
The
ahead. Go ahead.
idea, where are these ideas coming from? People think of them if they're in the right frequency. And, you talk about you got to be in the right frequency. You can get the information and get the answers. That was what the original question was when we started this clubhouse, or even from last week. How do we get answers for ourselves? Because there's so much confusion out there that, and we're getting information from outside of ourselves that may not, a lot of times, is not for our best and highest interest or good
Yes.
you know
Yes.
so tapping into that akasha is basically a way of getting answers for ourselves, and it's accurate. It's very.
I'd like everyone to take a moment to just think, if you haven't considered this once in your life, how did the ancient ancestors, or our ancestors in general, know what plants would heal which ailment? How
Yep.
did they know that? How were they doing this?
How'd they
It
come up with textbooks? All the information in these different textbooks. I think about the medical books and textbooks that came up. Where did it start? Where did it originate? And you're absolutely right.
when we consider that ancient man was healing before we had traditional modern medicine or allopathic medicine, they were communing with the plants. They
Yeah,
were translating information through the field. They were tapped into the Akasha. This muscle has atrophied, as well as our understanding of our capacity to be able to do such a thing. So this that's one of the things that has baffled me for a long time. Like, how do our ancestors know what's what? Like, okay, this thing is poison. Oh no, take this and it's going to heal this ailment. And it was through the Akasha, and the plant spoke to them,
right.
through frequency, through informing, through the mental plane, through the feeling, the information. So to kind of get back on track with what I wanted to share was this idea of like the like what it kind of looks like reading the records, and like the evolution of reading the records. So a lot of what I've seen throughout my time has been fantastical looking, where like a lot of changing of the voice, and not saying that that doesn't happen, because that can even happen with communicating,
Right, right,
due to the frequency. But it's just very fantastical,
right.
and TV-esque, Hollywood-esque,
Yep,
and
that's what it is, Hollywood.
you know distorting our understanding. So somewhere along the years, Lao Tzu shared with me, T, now you can access the records without the pathway prayer. I was like, what? Really? No. For real? And she's like, yes, try it. And I did it in the moment, and I was mind blown.
Yeah.
And in doing it, I I could see walls coming down, but I could also see that there was still much more. Well, looking back in hindsight, that there was much more work to do. So, fast forward, reading the records, my experiences recently has been as simple as having what could appear to be a conversation with a client,
Right, right.
and just so chill, so to say. But it's
Mhm,
very clear that where the information is coming from is beyond me. But it is me, but it
mhm,
isn't. It's it's the person. I mean, there's so many other facets regarding it. I don't want to get too deep into the details, because you got to take the class. But at the same time, part of the goal here is to kind of give a little taste of the understandings. And one of the things that I learned is that the frequency of oneness will allow for greater connectivity as well as accuracy. And like the as I began to see myself more and more in the other, the client or whoever I'm connecting with, whether it's a tree, my accuracy and the connectivity began to heighten. There is one issue that often happens with the energetic practitioners, is that we oftentimes see ourselves as separate from that who are we are kind of facilitating the healing or reading. We see them as, oh, I'm just helping heal this person so they can become better, because I'm somewhere in our minds we think we're good. I
mhm,
had to release that, because that was a block hindering me from truly accessing the Akasha in
mhm,
truth, in the way in which the Akasha wants us to access it. Because the field itself has a intelligence. And the intelligence of the field, or the way in which we access this field, has been greatly distorted by esoteric and occult leaders throughout time who have been operating as gatekeepers. But we don't have to go too deep into that. But
mhm,
this idea of we are not separate from the person who we are reading in so many different ways. And it comes back to this idea of oneness
mhm,
and seeing yourself in the other. Instead of seeing yourself as separate, placing oneself into the space of, I am this person. I am this being outside of me, and they are reflecting me back to me. They are not separate, no matter what my illusions and conditioning has informed me. So greater adherence and integration, and the ability to see through the lens of oneness, will open the individual up to receiving accurate information via the Akasha, because all things are connected. This is part of the framework. And in this understanding, I began to see where, as a healer, as a clearer, and a reader of the records, a communicator, many of the experiences that I have gone through has set me up for success to help the soul that's outside of me.
Mm-hmm.
And the way in which I am able to be of greater assistance to the soul is through seeing myself in them, and vice versa. And
Yeah.
there are various levels and degrees at which the individual, meaning myself or the practitioner, may have overcome such block or hurdle, but it is always one. There is never any separation. And I have found this to be one of the major keys which has allowed me to access a whole deeper layer of truth, a whole deeper level of accuracy. And the transformations that have occurred have been startling. Just seeing not only within the individual, but also what is brought forth for myself as a facilitator. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna stop there. Any thoughts on that? Because I'm rolling. I'm on fire right now.
Oh, this is very informative. I actually, I'm going to open it up to the audience. Does anyone have any questions? Any information or any insight?
In Lakesh and Veritas with honor, respect, and gratitude. This is Tiffany.
And like honor is gratitude.
Thank you both, Delilah and Tarvars. First of all, I took so many notes. I ran out of paper, so my notes are like in all different angles of my paper now. I wanted to share a communication experience from this morning that I observed with children. But before that, I wanted to ask Tarvars, when is your next Akashic Record reading class? Because I too have had the other experiences that you have, and I'm ready to step into the new information that you're bringing forward.
Yes. So our upcoming Level 1 Akashic Records class is October 6th through November 3rd. This class will be held on Thursdays from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern. So it's an evening class. If you're East Coast, you're, I think, Pacific. So, it's around the afternoon. Yeah.
And
And
it's
just a couple
virtual.
of little tidbits about it. I'm sorry, what was that, Delilah?
And it's virtual, online, just so that everyone.
That's right. We are in the age of Zoom. So we will be on Zoom conference wherever you are. And one of the prerequisites is event soul clearing. One, we have just recently shared one mind reconnection is of high benefit because of all classes taught out of the sun requires one mind. It's to get into that telepathic communication because that's part of it. And within the class, the energetic support products that are or tools that are required are the Akashic Records insignia. That's a whole other idea, which I feel like if you'd be willing to bring myself or even Lao Tzu on to speak about the insignias, because that's
Oh
where the
yeah,
wealth is in working
yeah.
with these intelligent technologies.
That's where the power is, right?
Yeah, yeah. So getting yourself an Akashic record insignia in one of its many forms. One of the most powerful forms of working with this technology would be in the 3-foot rug, which we have available in stock. Um, next would be the fleece blanket, and then we have a 8.5 by 11 laminated card with the insignia as well. And in currently in production, this would actually be available more than likely somewhere during the class. Would be an Akashic Records patch, something that you can adhere to your clothes, or some people are just carrying it in their pocket. Like I got my Archangel Michael in my left pocket right now. I'm rolling with the angels right now. And these tools are definitely necessary for amplifying and augmenting your connection, strengthening your connection. And I'm on my Akashic Record rug right now. I always do my communications with these rugs, and it's the same concept when I'm doing property clearings. I'm on the rug. If I'm not on the rug, I pull out my flip chart or work with a card because I have found that it amplifies my connectivity with the morphic field of that technology.
Yeah.
So,
Yes,
yeah.
I agree. I mean, this has been a wealth of information. Thank you for informing us. I think what I'm going to end up doing, this warrants us to come back. Tiffany, I would like to invite you back because I want to get, basically there are several communicators here and I want everyone to share their experiences with regards to as a communicator, you know, and
Yes.
their process. And we'd love to have you back next week to describe, because you're the communicator of bees. Oh my gosh. And, you know, Lauren's here. She's a communicator of flowers, and Serenia is of herbs, you know, and of course, T, if you can come back as well to kind of like, kind of moderate and help and add to any additional information. But this was like a wealth of information that you just gave to us this evening to give people a better understanding of what it is, and to clear away those, again, those myths and misconceptions that are imposed from Hollywood TV, you know, ooh, you know, that sort of thing.
Well, certainly. So thank you again. It was a pleasure to be on. And again, part of my goal is to bring the heresy and to burn down the lies of the institutions that have came before us, that
Yeah,
have enslaved us within this limited understanding. It's more so like willfully allowing ourselves to be enslaved, because we got to take responsibility here. But
yes, yeah,
we truly are in a position of power, especially those who are aligned with of the Sun, working with us. In the many different services and classes. There's a wealth of knowledge here, and a lot of it just is anchored in this idea of calling for the truth. I can
right,
see where my experience of calling for the truth allowed me to get to this point, and
right,
letting go of the lie, having the
right.
courage to move beyond, what I thought was the truth, but really wasn't. So thank you again for inviting me, and I look forward to coming on again. And if anyone has any questions about the class, feel free to contact us at Of the Sun, our office admin Lauren, and yeah, we're gonna have an awesome class.
It's going to be off the chain because I know even from, you know, the past teachings, it was so interesting. And now I can't imagine how great this is going to be, you know. And speaking about responsibility, I'd like to invite everyone to the whole responsibility meditation sessions that are hosted by Enlica Studios on Tuesdays and Thursdays, 6 a.m., 12:30 p.m., and 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, for 30 minutes, joining in, tapping into the power of Ahonoponopono, the powerful technique of forgiveness, reconciliation, and gratitude. And we recently have started a bonus session on Wednesdays at 6 a.m., lasting 45 minutes. And for more information, you can go on to the Enlica Studios websites, enlicastudio1.com, enlicastudio2.com, and enlicastudio4.com, as well as on Enlica Studios YouTube channel. You know, so this was great. I like to thank Tarvars for such insightful information. Look forward to seeing you again next week so we can continue this discussion, insightful discussion, and then we can also hear um, the experiences of the communicators who are on this line to share with everyone, you know, their experiences, their process as far as how to tap into communicating with the consciousness of various things, the various life forms. So I look forward to seeing you all next week as you share these tools of empowerment with everyone. You know, and remember, knowledge is power, and taking action from this knowledge is true power. So everyone, with honor, respect, and gratitude, and Lakesh and Veritas.
And Lakesh and Veritas.
And Lakesh
Honor,
Veritas
respect,
and
and
Veritas
gratitude.
with honor, respect, and
And Lakesh and
gratitude.
Veritas with honor, respect, and gratitude.